We are live. Hi, Gabe.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good. I'm feeling just perfectly cooked today.
Tell me more.
Well, I don't feel like, you know how you feel like sometimes with your hair, it might get like a little frayed at the end and you might get just a little overprocessed, you know.
Oh, nice
it kind of
segue.
it kind of builds up on your spine and then kind of just comes out at
Wow.
you.
Wow. Wow. That was a perfect. I don't want to ruin it by talking about it more, but that was a great segue. Wow. Perfectly cooked. So I thank you everybody for tuning in. We see a lot of the usual crowd here. Thanks guys. Appreciate you seeing you every week. Gabe wrote a killer blog post and made a killer half-hour long video as a companion to that blog post. So we challenged ourselves. What are we going to do during BlogChat? How are we going to talk more about a project, a product that he already thoroughly explained so very well? So Gabe has, we're going to walk you through some of it. We're just going to like do the BlogChat conversation, but Gabe has a surprise for you. We're going to do some even more stuff. So we'll get to that. First, a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, this is being recorded. If you're watching this now, use the live chat. We'd love to have questions from you, any and all. If you didn't leave questions on the blog post, leave them here so Gabe can answer them live. If you're watching this afterwards, leave your comments down below in the comments section and we will get back to you. We love questions. And just take a moment because it helps us if you hit that like button and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit the dinger so that you know when we're going live when we publish new videos like Gabe's awesome half-hour tutorial on how to not overprocess your Milky Way images.
I just got notified we're live, Matt.
It works.
It works.
See, it works.
It's cool. It's nice.
It totally works. And I just realized that my microphone was like a mile away. I hope you hear me better now.
Oh, now you were in a distant universe. Now you're back a little closer to us.
Now I can sound mellifluous. Yes. All right. So let's breeze through your blog post. Because I just want to say for anybody who's watching this after the live stream, pause and hit that there's a little card that's going to pop up right now that leads you to the actual video that Gabe made. I'm going to put that in there. Go watch that and then come back to this and participate in the rest of the discussion because that will help you so much to have already experienced what Gabe already put so much care into presenting for you.
And also, I have to say, I'm giving a shout out to Matt, who did a faboo job editing it.
Thanks, man. It was fun. It was fun editing you.
You have a very deft hand.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Gabe, just let's take a jog through the blog post and cover the most important points.
So I think just first off, is that I want everyone to recall their first experience of seeing the Milky Way, right? Because it's the first time is just you basically jump out of yourself with joy when you see that, and every time is exciting. It's like seeing the auroras, right? It's like there's not one time that it's like okay, I've seen the auroras like 50 times, and then you might be okay if it's not a good show, you might be like meh, it's not that good, or you can't see the galactic core, okay. But it's always exciting, especially if you're into this stuff. And it's just a matter of, really being present and really remembering that experience and remembering what you're seeing with your eyes and what you're seeing on the back of your camera. And then how can we bring that home and then share it? How can we then process it, transform it, massage it, and then share it, with it. And keeping true to kind of what we saw with our eyes, which is often so magical as it is. Right. But I think that a lot of people get, they've seen the pictures from Hubble, which, Hubble is its own thing and gets really a zoomed in look at very specific sort of obviously sorts of nebula and just really, really deep zoom into it. And to be honest, a lot of those colors are interpreted by the person that back home, because a lot of that is black and white images, and then they kind of put in the roads. So, and I've just seen so many of those colors kind of pop out in the Milky Way. It's like, oh, that I know that nebula is there, so now this area is going to be pink and magenta, and this area is going to be purple, and this area is going to be. And while it might look kind of like cool, it's like, it's not real. It's not what we see with our eyes.
Right.
And that's one of the pitfalls that we can fall in. And really for us, I think it's about bringing back and sharing the natural Milky Way to the rest of the world.
I'm with you on that one, man. I know that when I first began processing Milky Way images, my first instinct is when I started processing digital black and white images was to make everything important, to make everything crunchy, to make everything bright.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned restraint. I developed taste over time. And I think your blog post walks us through that very neatly. And your first example is a wonderful one. So let's take a look at that.
Sure. Yeah, this is actually I think my first successful Milky Way pano. This is for those of you who are on my Centennial workshop for the eclipse. We got this view along the ranch, and it was really, really a very special view. And you can have the stars reflecting in the little creek that comes by as you're at exit 0 in Montana. And this was just wonderful. I think this is like a 5 to 7 image pano of it. And I actually haven't revisited this one. So this is from 2017 processing. So we don't have texture here as a brush, but I definitely used clarity or actually I probably just used clarity on this one and sharpening for this. And I did a global adjustment, or actually I'd used a gradient to really go at the stars here, but kind of in a gentle way. And I was really kind of, in my processing considerations, really looking at the foreground and making sure we can kind of bring out that shadow detail there, so we can see that railing all along the side, the grass, but it still looks dark. It still looks like it's at night. So many Milky Way shots that we see are just silhouette, right? And that's, while that is realistic and in one shot, I actually think with this is a single shot for both the foreground and the sky here. I was just able to kind of eke out enough of that exposure with it for it. But yeah, this is a special one.
Yeah, indeed. You wanted to, I guess we could take a peek. I mean,
we don't have to call anybody out, but we could just, you're right. I mean, so part of it is obviously there are so many over-processed Milky Way images, like that woman and walking down that path. What does that even have to do with the Milky Way? But okay.
Your post wasn't about hashtagging, but obviously This person needs help with hashtagging.
Exactly. But I mean, obviously a quick call out to the one with the car. That's those colors are a little false, and and it's very crunchy. So the one there,
we're not picking on anybody in particular.
Exactly. We're just kind of a quick overview, because here's the thing is that so many of the Milky Way shots that we see on Instagram, or if you Google just Milky Way, so many of them are over processed here, and they're just, instead of using brushes, it seems like people are painting with hammers on it. Right. And it just makes it unrealistic, and still, with so many people in the world who have not seen a Milky Way, it makes it, now when they go out, they're expecting to see that, or again, they're applying those extra sharpening, extra clarity, extra dehaze, all these other, they're kind of, again, hammering home something that is, already pretty freaking fantastic on its own. I'm finding, especially now, shooting with the Z6 and shooting with the proper exposure, so getting up to those 6,400 and 12,800, I don't have to do much. If you get the right exposure, You could probably, I mean, it's raw, so it's a little unprocessed. It just, if you properly capture it, you don't have to do much. I mean, you can go in there and do some stuff, but be careful with it. And really, like we say with almost all photography, day and night, try to get as much information as you can in that shot. Now with night photography, there's a lot of blending that's needed for foreground and sky shots. So we understand that. But try to get the information you need in that shot or in those multiple shots that you could put together then. And hopefully we all like shooting, you know, and yeah, we do process and we have Adobe certified people here at NPAN, you know, but the more we can spend shooting is always preferred, you know, or moving on to the next image because there's always a bunch of goodies.
So in short, it's tempting to make the Milky Way look like a fantasy. And what we're promising you might be more enjoyable would be to choose to do something that looks a little bit more natural, even though it's less, let's say, advertising. You know,
well,
let's slap you in the face with like color crunch,
yeah,
high contrast.
right.
You know, a little bit more like the eye might observe it, even though our eyes are not so good with contrast at night.
Right. It's such, I mean, we all go wow for a Milky Way, no matter if it's overprocessed or not online, because we're still kind of new to it and so many people still haven't seen it. But when we kind of push, and also, you know, listen, maybe we're not used to processing the Milky Way. So again, we use maybe some of the tools and even some of the tools that we're familiar with, and we kind of maybe use them a little heavy-handed because we're excited and because we want to amplify it a little bit more. So just like anything, you know, and kind of we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's like 2 or 3 years ago, we were probably over processing a little bit more, and we've actually, like a fine wine, mellowed with age, or gotten a little bit more realistic, you know, with it. And because we're seeing so much of the unrealistic stuff, we're taking a stand for realism here. Though I will say, I mean, I do see a lot of nice, like fantastical ones. And I'm okay with that too. I'm not saying don't be creative and don't have your vision fit into that one realism box, right? But understand the Milky Way, understand how to process it, and then take it to your direction. Because I do see a lot of beautiful work that is sort of like, you know, fantastical and stuff. And if you embrace that and that's your vision and that's what your feed looks like and everything like that, yes, then it's true to you. Right. But we're trying to make sure you find center first and then decide where you want to go.
I'll add 2 things. One is that that old adage, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like when you start processing Milky Way, like you might be using daytime techniques for nighttime stuff or whatever, right? You know, you might not understand how gentle you can be, yet still urge it to come forward in a way that's beautiful but not mocking. And the second thing is that gosh, it escapes me now. So I'm just going to go straight to your example, because you have a great side-by-side example here on the blog post, and we can stop talking about it and start showing it.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, here we go. So and I love that. Right. I love
slider,
these.
Right?
I love those sliders we have. That's such a cool feature. So there we have how I processed it, and sort of now an example of kind of amping everything up. Amping the colors are now saturated, and while that actually kind of has a more of a wow factor, it's totally unrealistic to kind of what was there, you know. So and to be honest, I mean, just looking at it also, it just has a little just too much kind of yellow kind of going on, and things are being crunched more. So yeah, the one that's over processed, the one over on the right is correctly processed.
Yeah, I'm just having fun sliding this back and forth. Pardon me. Thank you. You're very helpful. Okay, moving on. Okay, so I think at this point I was there when you shot this.
Yes. Yep. This was an awesome. I love this, and this was one of my first shots at night, also with the Hasselblad,
Mhm.
which that was such a really cool thing to shoot with. And now this is a blend. This is sort of a sort of like yeah. I think I got this one sort of. The foreground shot is in the middle of Civil Twilight, and then the star shot, the Milky Way star shot is about 30 minutes afterwards or something, where it wasn't that far past. We're just entering sort of somewhere between nautical and astronomical, and that Hovenweep is a dark sky location, and I was just amazed to see so many stars so early in the night. And that's sort of where that a little bit more of that magenta kind of is coming from, because there is still a little bit of that light in the sky. Get a little bit of the light pollution in the distance
From Cortez.
Yep. And here's the thing, and I'll talk about. I have an example of another blended shot to share with you guys later. But a lot of the blended shots I see now. Okay, great technique to take that picture of the foreground and then take that picture of the sky, and then you get the best of both and you put them together. That's great. Oftentimes, however, that shot that we take blended in the foreground is going to be too bright, really. It's usually taken a little earlier and stuff like that, and the colors might not match as with the sky too, because again, the light color have all changed with as we're losing that light in the sky. So it is a little tricky. What I often with that foreground, you might need to, it's better to have it again, start with a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit more overexposed, but then darken it down and to match that scene, And so I look at them side by side first before I put them together to hopefully try to match it. Because then if you blend it together, then you got to make another selection,
right?
To kind of get them fixed. So I try to do my best, but then oftentimes kind of go in a little bit later. But this one, that foreground has that, it still seems dark, it still seems at night. And the Milky Way is lovely and delicious.
Yeah. It feels like departing, like just the last kiss of sunset to me. That's what that feels.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and I'm right. We all complain quite a bit as night photographers about light pollution, but I do enjoy working with it. And in this case, it wasn't eating up too many stars. Yeah. And it gives actually a nice balance to the scene, that there is a little bit of warmth in the foreground. Then you've got that sort of sunset strip. Yeah. And then you've got, that cooler sky, and that just color-wise helps tell the story, and it helps add depth to the scene as well.
Love it. Okay. Here's where we get into the weeds. Would you rather talk about these things with live images, or do you want to talk about the difference between 2020 and 2010 edits? Because you have this other slider.
Yeah. We'll talk about the sliders when I'm in the nitty gritty of stuff. But here's a nice, right. This was my first Milky Way shot, or first successful Milky Way shot in 2010, Independence, California, with a D700 and the Zeiss 21 2.8. And I was really happy about this. This is an image I made into my book, and I've lots of presentations and stuff like that. I've always loved it. But I looked at it now, this was in 2010. So that was Lightroom 3, right? Which I believe Lightroom 3 introduced clarity. I'm pretty sure Lightroom 3 introduced clarity. So, so that was one of the first tools that we got that really kind of helped make the sky pop quite a bit more. But also, again, we had to be wary of. So this is just with clarity. And when I saw it and I was working, I was like, oh, I want to show this image for this post. I'm like, you know what? It actually looks a little mushy. It looks like it could use a little bit more overall pop. And so I said, well, let's revisit this now with dehaze and with texture and pow, and exactly, right? And I think, that Milky Way there is a nice example of, it goes pop, but it's not screaming everywhere. You know, I really, you know, I did a global dehaze to the sky. So that kind of increased the contrast, increased a little of the saturation. But then I use a local adjustment really with the brush to get in there with some texture and some more clarity around the dust channels of the Milky Way and stuff like that. So and I think it really is, and it was, I was just nice also D700 to nice to be able to still be able to milk out more information, you know, with older technology, but still with modern, you know, software to get it. So I really like this. And then I thought the first image was a little too green. So I also kind of went to the magenta side and kind of, you know, fix that up a little bit there. And
Looks like you applied a lens profile correction too.
I think I did. Yeah. As well for that. Yep.
It's breathing.
Yeah, it is. Right. It is breathing for sure. Yep.
That's cool, man. That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay. So this is the second plug for Gabe's video. Check it out if you haven't already. Watch it again if you have. I think we should pop into just saying, hey, I think Gabe has a couple of images that he's going to show us live. The difference between correctly processed and jacked.
Do we have any comments or questions before I jump in? I don't have the page up, so I don't know if we want.
We do not have any questions. There's definitely chatter. You know, our people love talking to each other.
All right. Okay.
It's by the way, it's hot out there right now. So
yes.
And other parts.
Matt, you need to let me share my screen.
What, you want to be our co-host? Gee.
I thought I was the co-host.
You totally are. You have God power now.
All right. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at here. I wanted to kind of show these again because this is the version. This is sort of my version over here. That was my processed correctly version here. So we're still, again, we use 3 Luxley, so we're still getting that detail in here, and we're still getting the information along here. This was a little troublesome. This light pollution was tricky because it was kind of eaten up in the sky, but I love it. And here's the trick, guys, with this was that so many of, so when you really get to a dark sky location, all the stars are so bright. And especially when we create these global, you know, adjustments, they really make, and even if it's sort of a selective adjustment that's globally applied to the sky, it makes the stars compete with each other. And that has been actually the challenge and a little bit of the struggle lately for me. And that's why I've kind of gone back and forth between using a Milky Way brush or not. And a lot of times I started out using a Milky Way brush, and then I was just like, it was hard. It was difficult to do with sometimes just clarity. You really had to really have, again, a low opacity, a deft hand in applying it, because what I've learned through time is when you apply that, you know, it really needs to be applied to the brighter parts. When you start applying it to the darker regions, it kind of just gets too much. There's plenty of contrast in here already. So we really want to kind of focus a lot on the tendrils of everything. So why don't we let's take a break. Let's look at kind of how I process this and kind of turn on, turn off some stuff here. So here is my gradient that I dropped for the sky. And with the sky, let's take a look what I did. I did a negative shadows of 40 and a negative blacks. And I increased the dehaze to 11. So let's kind of just wipe those out for a second. 24. Okay, boom. And we could kind of see where, you know, okay, that's, and this is kind of looking it's looking good, but it's looking raw, right? That sort of like kind of a mushy raw file. And that and dehaze is definitely going to be our friend. And I'll go in there and I'll apply. So here I am, 10:15. But again, a lot of us, all right, okay, that obviously is too much. But dehaze, I find dehaze to be an easy one to handle, because really when things are going wrong, the colors shift quickly. So it's a matter of when are those colors shifting in a way I don't want them to go. And we're kind of starting to see the blue in here start to be very different than the color over here and the color over here. We're kind of getting like a blue sort of strip right in there. So I know that it's going too far. And so I'm just going to bring it back down to something like, I was at 11 before, and it's pretty much kind of around there. Because even with 15, I'm starting to see a little bit of shift over there. So I'm going to kind of still stick with that 11. And that just kind of makes that whole sky, again, it's like putting that dehaze is almost like putting that circular polarizer on the sky that really makes it pop. Okay, so, but I also now wanted to add some contrast to the scene a little bit naturally. And, I'll check my highlights. I will check my highlights and my whites as well. But highlights I very rarely use, and especially here because of that light pollution, it is kind of affecting it. And to be honest with you, the stars are pretty bright. Like, why would I use highlights and whites? I generally will just use whites to make the stars pop in a way that isn't adding, a sharpening effect to it. It's just kind of bringing out the brightness of the stars. And so let's see what that effect does. And it's good, but again, and I could maybe go obviously a little bit more local with it, because obviously the horizon line is being affected quickly. But what I wanted to do by creating a little contrast here, I wanted to take down my shadows. And we can always take things down. And really, there's not much. It's just a little bit. I think I had like 40 points or something like that. But boy, I could almost even go all the way down to 100, because there's just not as much shadows in there. But it is giving a little bit of separation. Blacks, turn a lot quicker. So we can see, and obviously over here, this is the bad side of the black slider right here, folks. And that's when we really start to see a very strong gradient, that graduation starts to really get separated. And while that might look great and zingy for the Milky Way, it just, for me, it looks like a choppy sea, right? And we're getting a lot of, all the stars are competing for each other, but we're also getting not a smooth tonal range. So I'm going to bring that back. And I think we kind of had it anyways, but just looking at it again. And I'm thinking, right around that sort of that 15 to 20 mark. So let's say 18 is looking nice right there. And we could kind of go see it before and now after with those adjustments. So that's where I made my gradient adjustment. Okay. And let's go over to our brush and we can see. So there's where I laid out my brush. So if we look at that, I'm really avoiding, right, the black parts of the Milky Way. I'm really kind of following the dust channels, the dusty parts of the Milky Way. And really what I like and what we can do, but is to really hopefully pull out the tendrils of the Milky Way a little bit. And let's kind of go into, let's get a little closer look at it. Okay. All right. And so what we see I did with this brush here is, hold on. There it is. Okay, so this one, I used a brush at a clarity of 25 and a texture of 6. Now, also important is that I used a flow of 65. Now, flow is sort of like opacity, right? So instead of laying out exactly 25 and 6 in one brush, I'm laying down a little bit more than half of that. So I can easily do that. And so they can see kind of that pull out right there. So let's just see the, let's see this, hold on. Let me grab my brush, hold on. Whoop, there we go. Whoop, hold on, folks. Live editing. And I've somehow gotten a new, right, I've now gotten a new thing here. So let's delete that because we can see I got a dehaze of 88 and a highlights of minus 78. So let's go back to this mask. Okay, here we go. So let's just take a look at if I amplify this more or less. So take a look at it full screen. And if we take that clarity at 25 now, and we bring it up to, you know, twice that amount, right? And we can kind of see, you know, while it might be appealing, it is kind of starting to compete with the other stars and just starting to kind of just get a little bit more unrealistic. A good rule of thumb with clarity is to really, I don't go much above 35, 40. After that, I really have to question it. So with this, we can kind of see that it's kind of mixing with the rest of the gentle scene at 25. And texture, you know, that just, you can kind of see how that just kind of brings out. Texture has been, you know, one of our newest tools that we have. And what's so nice about this is it doesn't shift the colors as much with the saturation, with the clarity and the dehaze. So you can really just go in there and do some nice kind of just sharpening. And while we might use this more in a landscape scene and fall in love with it, especially if we got rocks and mountains and stuff like that, very easily could use texture of 30 to 50 with that. Still with the sky, I'm really in that range of about 5 to 10, 15 max. Okay. So also I toned down this lake over here a little bit because it was kind of competing in brightness. And then I used, you know, a gradient to make adjustments to the foreground as well. But let's jump over to another image because I know you guys saw this image on the blog, but I wanted to kind of show you just some of the finer details. And you can kind of see how I've laid out. I wanted to kind of show you the behind the scenes of how I processed it, where I used 2 gradients, one for the foreground, one for the sky, and 3 brushes, really, you know, a brush for the rocks here. And I think I made a little darkness there, a brush for the Milky Way, and then a brush to tone down the lake in the distance. All right. So this was one of my favorite shots of the year last year. Here it is. Boom, there's the completed version of it. Okay, this was also in Lawson at the base of that same volcano we were just looking at. So we're just looking at the crater up top here, right up there. But I really, and we went there the first night, and second, I said, I have to go back the second night because I need a base shot, because when I saw this and the path leading up, and I pulled out photo pills immediately, and I was like, Milky Way rises right above it. We've got to get this shot. And, you know, I had the whole class there with me too, because they're like, yes, this looks just like a perfect shot. So I want to show you, here was our twilight shot, right? So this was sort of, you know, our twilight shot, and to be honest with you, I mean, the sky doesn't look great at all, but I'm not looking at the sky, right? There are some stars, but for this, again, we have to think when we're doing blended images, we really have to think and focus of, okay, this is just the foreground. This is what I'm going to focus on. And then we'll take a look at the sky or any other things. And you might be taking 2 or 3 pictures for each one. So this is my correctly processed foreground shot. And then this is my correctly processed night shot. And you could see, again, there was so much shadow here, because obviously you could see, for me to get this shot, I'm not exposing for the sky. I wanted to bring out the detail. I wanted to kind of see this tree over here. And I wanted to see the information, and I did want to see the path of it, but I had to also be careful to make sure that that path wasn't, I darkened down this. If you can kind of see the processing I've done, I went down a half a stop with the exposure, and I made some global adjustments over here. And that's the beauty. When we're working on these shots blended, these are local shots, local adjustments we're making. We're just making them globally because we don't care about the sky. The sky is going to get kicked out. So now I don't have to worry about brushes and gradients. I could just make these adjustments. So I went up with my my highlights, up with my shadows, up with my whites, but also down with my blacks to still have that contrast. And I went up. Here's a perfect example. Texture was the highest one. It was 24 because texture just played so nicely, you know, bringing out that path. And we can really kind of see, you know, again, you know, no texture. And these 5-10 points that we would normally use with the sky, we really need more to bring out those footprints and path. You know, clarity was 19, which again, really makes that, again, too much clarity here. Everything is looking too sharp, where something like this just gives it a little bit more of that gentle feel to it. And then dehaze added just a little bit, brought down it actually helped bring down kind of the darkness. I was not using it for any color. There's very little color, obviously, in this scene, but I was using it to just darken it down and make it look like a nighttime shot, because that is the trick when you're blending these twilight shots, is that you have a difficulty. That twilight shot is going to look too daytime. So matching that white balance and matching those, the exposure to match the sky. So now let's look at the adjustments. Let's see, was it this one? Or I guess it must have been this one, because I don't see any adjustments there. That might be the raw. There it is. So there is my globalized local adjustments to the sky without needing to make a mask, because again, I don't care about anything here. I went up with the whites. So here I wanted to pull out the stars. So let's bring it down. And again, obviously very easy to recognize too many whites. But again, you know, one could say, well, what about 41? What about 30 on the whites? But again, it's those whites are making then every star compete with themselves. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit to right about there. And then I'm creating more contrast, because again, that Milky Way, which looks pretty good right out of the box here, folks. But that Milky Way is still has that raw, it could use a little pop to get past that raw mushiness. So going down with those blacks help me just create naturally a better contrast than using just the contrast slider itself. The contrast slider doesn't let you control. It's going to be usually, you know, -1, you know, +1, minus, you know, 1 black the whole way across. It's going to usually keep the factors the same way. Whereas when I kind of break out the contrast and really customize it with whites and blacks or highlights and shadows, I can really create my own customized contrast there. And then with this, I made the global adjustment of the dehaze. So similar to the previous image, I can go up here and just make it, right? Just make it look pop right there. And then I don't think, did I do a brush? Oh, I did my Milky Way brush here too. Okay, so let's take a look at this. All right. So here I do have my brush, and it is covering the whole Milky Way here, but I was very careful. I really only lightly hit the black parts of the Milky Way. And what did I use on this one? The other time I used 15. For the other image, I used 15 clarity and 5 texture. Here I settled with 10 and 7. So, you know, even if you might make your own Milky Way brush, or, you know, be open to customizing it even within the same scene. One was the night before at the top of this same dark sky location, and the other was at the base of that mountain at that same dark sky location. So here I went in with that brush and applied it also again with that flow, and with a nice feather too, so it wasn't a hard transition. And it looks like I also, look at there. So I did a global adjustment. So I did a global adjustment here of this brush with that, and then kind of went in and fine-tuned that Milky Way even more with this. And let's kind of turn on and off those effects. And we can kind of see, right, how that kind of just made the tendrils, especially here, really kind of come out in a nice way there. So without and with. And again, if we're taking this over the top here, and I just used get a bit of clarity, but again, we're kind of taking this, and in those spots, it's just getting a little too the total range. And let's kind of zoom in to take a look at it. You know, this is no clarity. This was it just with the global, but I put in another 10, 15 points, and that just gives a nice little separation. So I kind of just went to those areas around the Milky Way with a brush at a low opacity, and this time just with a little bit of clarity, and kind of just, you know, kind of brushed a little bit more in and about there. To kind of make it work. And looks like, there we go. And right, like, so I'm looking for these areas right in here to kind of just bring out a little bit more, sort of the gray matter, so to speak. And I'm trying to move up my screen. Maybe I'll use this guy. And again, kind of just, again, focusing on that area, kind of right in there. All right. So let's take a look at it full again. And then this was an easy one then to do, is go into, you know, photo, you know, edit in Photoshop and you have to actually select them both. So once you have both images selected, you can then go to photo, edit, and open as layers in Photoshop. And boy, this was such an easy one to blend. I'm not going to open it up because my computer's a little slow right now. But this is such an easy one to lay down a selection. This is the easiest selection. I just had like 3 trees to deal with, you know, and the selection tool does a great job of that. And just, again, use a brush to kind of brush into the sky over that. Where this can be tricky is when you do have a lot of, you know, say your horizon line that is separating the sky with the, you know, the sky and the horizon line where they're meeting, there's lots of trees, or there's just lots of buildings or other stuff that can make a selection tricky. That's when you just have to kind of zoom in there, go in there, maybe override the auto selection, and do some adjustments there. Okay, so here's the blended one, and it looks like I also made a couple more adjustments from here on this image. And so this brush right here, and this is probably just darkening and now working on the tonality. So, you know, I did a pretty good job of seeing, the two images, you know, side by side and making a global adjustment to how the foreground and the sky would look. But then I wanted to kind of come in here and just give now a little, this was going down with the shadows, 26 points, and the exposure just a touch, because I wanted this area to be bright, this area to be dark, and then it to get bright again up at the side. And some of the rocks, I believe, were getting a little, so here's, I also made an adjustment here to the whole ground one more time. Well, it looks like I went down another 2 stops. So I still wanted to make it darker to make it really better match the sky. So I went down 2 stops, texture, clarity, and a lot of the clarity and dehaze here. But again, this is on the landscape and kind of giving it its punch. And let's just take a look at, if I were to take out that exposure, that's sort of what the exposure I was looking at. And I'll get rid of the clarity, texture, and dehaze too. So this is kind of what I was looking at, which again, that it just doesn't match the night light, right? And where it would be. So I immediately kind of took it down a couple stops, as we said. But by taking down the couple stops, it looks great now up here. Like this now matches the transition of the landscape to the sky. But now I'm losing that punch that I had here. And I really want that. You see the path and the footprints and stuff in the sky. So I used the I used the texture, and I liked how that now kind of really works well with the sand right here. I really went heavy-handed with the clarity, because not only is the clarity, you know, making that texture of the land come out more, but it's also adding some further contrast to the scene. So helping with that graduation, and then using the dehaze also does a job of just darkening down these, as well as giving it a little bit of punch. So let's see. Come on there it is. Right in there. And then when I do something final over here, and then I also highlighted the pathway with an exposure of about 1.5 stops. So let's take a look at what that is with and without. So without, and that's with all of it, you know, and then with that. And I just wanted to kind of bring out a little bit, the pathway is getting a little bit dark. So I wanted to bring that back up to emphasize the strip going up. Whew. Matt, what do you think?
I think that was a marathon, man. You're amazing.
This one definitely took, I know this was sort of the speed, you got the speed view of kind of, this was an image that I obviously worked on a few hours for, right? But
for sure, yeah.
But it started with the concept, you know, seeing it, using photo pills to realize it, and, you know, also hiking up that path. I knew how hard that path was. It was like one of those, you know, 2 steps up, 1 step down, gravel path that, you know, wasn't that long, wasn't that far, but was
that what Chris calls type B fun?
That was type 2 fun.
Type 2 fun, right?
Type 2 fun, exactly. Yeah. But well worth it. But I knew the kind of the vision, and that's always great when you can kind of obviously pre-visualize what you want, and then obviously also when it works. And the key then, having those 2 images, working on them, and so much easier to work on them, as you can kind of see. I worked on them locally, but globally, because I was just looking at landscape in the sky and then putting them all together.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. So I think I'll stop sharing. Or let's do full screen to see the
full screen final.
Full screen final to see it all its beauty. Nice. Yeah.
That's just, yeah. It doesn't look like all the trickery that you went through happened. Yep. That's the beautiful thing about all the effort that you put into making this look natural. What an excellent example.
Thank you, buddy. All right.
Well, that's just amazing. We did get a couple of questions during this.
All right.
In fact, exactly 2. Julianne asked, "Have you ever heard of or tried the Case Wolverine Starglow filter, the Alan Wallace one that accentuates the brighter stars and makes them more colorful, and then it de-emphasizes the less bright stars so that constellations pop out.
Okay.
Have you tried it?
You know what? I haven't, I think that Lance has been dabbling with that a little bit, I think in post, not with the filter, but I think he did that with one of his main images where he went and specifically went to highlight the Big Dipper, and he went and just kind of went and, just did a little dot on each one.
Made it a
looked
little bit
natural
more bigger dippery, or yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I haven't used the filter. That does seem interesting and worth experimenting. Have you?
I have not. No, right now I'm in the middle of testing light pollution filters.
Right. Right.
So, no, I haven't.
And it was Julie. It was Julie or Julianne who.
Julianne.
Julianne. Julianne, have you used that filter?
Let us know.
Yeah, let us know. It seems interesting. Stars naturally, and I talk about it in the blog, that as well as in the video, that the natural white balance of the Milky Way is, I think, 4880. So, which is not anything we could dial into. And for me, that's too brown and too yellow.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to see it. And I've noticed in both stars and star trails that some stars are brighter and some stars are different colors. Obviously, some stars are cooler and bluer, the older stars, and then the younger stars are usually a little bit yellower or warmer. So that is kind of cool, and that might be a fun thing to accentuate on it. But again, when we do these, here's the thing: when we do these large, like sort of super wide Milky Way shots, it's hard to. I think that would be hard to see that, and where those filters will work better is maybe when we're doing more zoomed in shots of the nebula constellation and stuff like that. With it might not read as well with the super wide shots.
Understood. Yeah, it's definitely an aesthetic. I mean, the way Alan describes why it was developed is because he was trying to get this effect, ended up working with Case to develop a filter that would achieve his specific goals, which is to draw forth constellations and to have less distraction from the other things, which is almost like a parallel to what you've been describing tonight, which is why I understand that the question would come up naturally. Stephen added anecdotally that he hasn't seen any results yet. However, he believes he heard that a couple of people received theirs this past weekend, so we should start seeing results soon. So, boom. Hadley asked the following: do you process an image differently depending on where the image will be published? For example, on Instagram, Facebook, Flickr, printing on paper? Question marks.
Yes. So yes. For social media, I publish one way, and I know Instagram crunches, Facebook crunches, all the social media channels crunch, and oftentimes also a culprit to what we're probably seeing on Instagram is like, hey, I didn't do that. And sometimes when I'm careful with especially Instagram, I will take the time to look at the Instagram filters. When I publish it, then I'll kind of see the preview, which is not a great preview, but I might then either turn up or down the clarity or sharpening, or maybe bring out a little bit more of the shadows if I see that they're getting crunched a little bit more. But in Lightroom itself, I might, if I know this is going right to the web, I might go a little bit less with the processing of those values as well, because I know it will be amplified in that. Printing is a whole other game. For sure, printing is a whole other game. And that involves now doing, really, we should be profiling not only the monitor, but ideally, especially if we're printing at home, profiling our printer, or if we're working with a lab, really understanding maybe if they can either send you a profile or you can do a sample of it as well, because the print requires less, or it also depends how big of a print you're making, right? So if it's a small print, it actually might require more of more of that, of the clarity, sharpening, those kind of things.
Yep.
Where if it's bigger, it might require less. And sharpening, right now we haven't really talked about sharpening.
Yep.
But now sharpening really becomes very important. And there are this is something I know Tim and I have talked about. When are we going to do a sort of printing at home blog post video thing? Because there are definitely some considerations, and especially with the sharpening filter, you can have 3 or 4 different sharpening filters to use with thinking about the print, that you can have them saved and you only apply them, for the print. So lots of considerations there.
Different surfaces too.
Different surfaces, different sizes.
Printers. Yeah.
What I will say is that whenever you're printing something important, if it really is, something important before you, especially if it's going to be something like a big metal print, do like a 5x7 metal print first. Do that test. I know I've done that with Bay Photo a bunch with it, and now you can kind of remember, save those settings, put them, as a profile that you can put on with it. So for sure. Yeah. And Hadley, by the way, Hadley was standing right next to me when we took that Lawson shot. Hadley, I don't know if have I seen your version, Hadley?
We'll see in about 30 seconds when the delay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this is a good compliment to what you already laid out so well, Gabe. I hope that most people get a chance to watch the edited video, and to watch this impromptu ad hoc demonstration with additional.
I think we've got to go back to the blog and now put a link to this.
We can.
Exactly. We should. Because this was part 2, and really, and also taking a look at a blended image, which the blended images are popular and are a great way to really capture the landscape in the Milky Way. So that's probably more and more we'll be doing more blending throughout, So
well, Hadley replied, "I don't think so."
Yeah.
And then Julianne said, "Please do a printing blog." So there we go.
Okay. All right.
Vote.
All right.
And everybody else that watches this, let us know if that's interesting to you. Then we can schedule our content, because we look months ahead on this. So
nice. I will say a quick plug to printing. I believe for our Instagram live, it's going to be this Thursday, not tomorrow, but this Thursday. And I believe we're going to have Bay Photo there. So we're going to talk some more about printing. They've got a new style, the epic prints. So we're going to take a look at the epic prints, which I believe is fine art paper on top of metal.
What?
Yeah.
I'm tuning in.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Do it. 8 p.m. East Coast Standard Time.
Nice. We're getting dittos on the printing blog. I guess we have to do it.
All right. And Matt, we might have to pull in your Colorado skills.
Don't tell them I'm a Colorado. Okay. I might phone a friend on this one and see if we can get Brenda to join us. So
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have good friends in the color management industry who can make sure that everybody's questions get answered. In addition to the knowledge that we have baked in, there's just some things that are color science, So.
Yep. Exactly.
All right. Say what? Epic prints? That's what Steve Bush said. That's right. Epic prints.
And I'm hoping we can also get maybe a special deal for our viewers and alumni. So we really want to stay tuned.
That's right. If you want that, put it in the comments. Then we can show it.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, Gabe, thank you so much for your time. We just hit the exact 1 hour mark. I think it's a good place to put a pin in it.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and for comments and your questions and your time. We appreciate you. Again, one more plea for subscribing and hitting the like button. It lets us know if this was valuable to you. We really appreciate it. And if you really liked it, share with a friend.
Exactly. And I as we always say, seize the night, but gently massage the Milky Way.
That is a perfect place to say goodnight.